Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm in the top landing of our house, and my plan is to dig through some piles of books from these bookcases on the top landing. These are all my TBR Mountain, one of the many mountains around the house. I have this kind of plan that I was cooking up earlier today. I was doing some very basic arithmetic about how many books I've read each month this year to try and determine whether I should actually get rid of some of my to-be-reads, because I'll never get to them, basically. And it's just interesting looking. I read on average between 6 and 8 books a month. And there's other things, obviously, there's other things I dip into. But on the whole, it's about probably 6, to underestimate slightly, 6 a month. And I was just wondering if I could plan ahead for the winter, because I find I really enjoy December, but January and February I find really difficult. And although I do think of myself as a kind of happy mood reader, in that I will gravitate to whatever I fancy reading next, sometimes that can really stymie me. And you can be dizzied by choice, especially when you've got so many books about in the place. And I was thinking about times when, in the past, I've given myself a project where there's a heap of things to work through. I'm thinking especially about the reading Shelves in Order in 2003, which was this amazing thing that I set myself in the spring of 2003. And I thought, I'm just going to read this shelf in particular. And it was all to-be-read stuff. And it became a small bookcase and then a bigger bookcase. But I did work my way through in order, which meant that I didn't have to think about what I was picking up next. And it's very interesting how that works. When you just move from one thing to the next, it's a bit like being on holiday. And I remember there was one Christmas when I still lived in Norwich, and I came to Manchester for Christmas and brought my book bag with about 10 or 15 vintage kids books. And again, just worked my way through the pile with no thought whatsoever. And that really suited me. And I was thinking that might be a nice way of getting through January and February. I find that I only have any kind of crisis over what to read next. Of course, none of it's a crisis, it's all fun, isn't it? But that kind of awful sense of, I don't want to read any of these things. I don't want that. I don't want to endure that again. So maybe making some friendly heaps in order. And I thought, actually, that I don't fancy any of these, going through these. I thought that maybe 6 a month over 3 months of winter would make a nice pile of 18. I mean, I was thinking all sorts of grandiose things like, wow, if I could say maybe 75, 80 books a year, and here's 5 years worth, and put them all together in a heap and get rid of all the surplus, because clearly I'm going to have more than 400, 500 books to read in this house. But then that's too much. That's too too planned, too weird. But actually 3 months over tricky old winter isn't a bad idea. I don't mind that. Of course, one of the months is Christmas, and I've already piled up loads and loads of Christmas books I plan to enjoy. And actually, 6 of them are standing out as the most likely contenders. So Christmas is kind of sorted. There's one more week of November left, which is amazing that we've got this far, really. One more week of November, and I'm taking time off because As I think I've mentioned before, I've finished my work at this stage. I've finished a draft of something and a draft of something else, and everything's off with other people, being looked at and edited or whatever. So I've got a week that I'm going to give myself, at least a week, to read, and that's the rest of November. And there are some funny things here that I don't know if I've even got. So that would be probably 1.5 books in the ordinary run of things, but you'd hope to read a bit more in a week off. I'm being distracted by looking at book covers. You'd hope anyway. So I've got some lovely things lined up for this week. And I'll let you know more, I guess, as I get into the week. But I thought, what fun to think ahead to the dark winter months of January, February, and make a kind of parcel for myself. That's what I want to do. Make up a book parcel, a care package for myself for January and February with 12 books in that I would open on January the 1st. Of course, I'd know what was inside them. I'm not that daft. I wouldn't have forgotten already. But it's quite a nice plan, isn't it? It's funny that I'm going through all of these things and I'm like, I don't fancy anything here. That's really funny. I wonder what I'm in the mood for in January, February. You don't want to have too much of all one thing. That's what I've learnt. And the best months of reading, I keep standing up because my knees absolutely kill when I crouch too much. The best months of reading are ones with lots of variation. That's what I've found over the years. A bit of this and a bit of that. So a nice biography or two. And a thriller. A nice biography like this one of Fanny Craddock, the TV cook, which I've been looking forward to. Or an old-fashioned 1980s blockbuster. Maeve Binchy. I went through a stage where I read a couple of Maeve Binchys and I thought she is just the best. That kind of almost anecdotal storytelling where you feel as if somebody sat you down to tell you all this gossip. And I bought all of them, I think, or a whole heap of them, for off eBay for decent prices, and all in hardback. And I haven't gone back to it. Whoops. So maybe there's a chance for that. Let's see. David Mitchell. Now here's Cloud Atlas, which I've never read. Everyone goes on about this one. I've read everything else by him, just about. And this is the one that I never have. If it's time for him again. It is like, I do think of it like that. Is it time for them again to come back into your life? It's spending time with people, isn't it? That's what it's like. The thing about having books on your landing is you've got to be very careful not to make them too much of a obstacle. Not to be too dangerous for people staggering about and bumping into them, which could be disastrous. I don't know how I ended up with so many, really. You kind of annoyed. You get annoyed at yourself for amassing these things. Sometimes. Other times you find wonderful treasure that you've forgotten you'd had. I hope that's the case this time. Okay, I'm going to pause and come back to you in a bit. Whoops. when I've worked my way through some of these stacks. See you in a bit. I'm dusting and still going through these. I've meant to read this for a while, the Garth Marenghi book, which is a kind of spoof, isn't it, of horror novels of a certain type. Haruki Murakami has followed me from reading list to reading list, and I've read loads of his, and for some reason this one still hasn't grabbed me. Maybe it's a January book, I don't know. I keep finding Christmas books, but I've decided on those. Maybe not Katie Flynn this year. That's the door downstairs, I must get that. Hold on, I hope it's not a book parcel. Well, after a whole lot of toing and froing and dusting and mucking about, I think I've got a pile of books that I'm kind of happy with. First of all, of course, I've got to finish this. I've got the last 30 pages of this to go. I'll talk more about this in the next day or so, I think. Here's Jeremy creeping past, desperate to get in on the videos. The cat doesn't care, he's asleep. You see him? Those socks. I'll talk more about this because I've got a lot to say. I really like it. And next week I've settled on, now this is way too much for a week. I've been lugging this around for a while now, and I need to settle and read this new take on the Arthurian legends from Lev Grossman. The Bright Sword. It seems like exactly the right time of year. Not quite Christmas, and the kind of mulchy days of autumn. Perfect for legends. Actually, I was looking at this again, this Brian Sibley book, because of the Patty Callahan book about C.S. Lewis. I dug out, it doesn't take much digging, it's kind of there on the shelf with me. This is from Christmas 1989. And it was such a revelation at the time to a kid who'd grown up with the Narnia books to read a bit more about the making of them. So that's been a nice return this afternoon. Anyway, so this week coming up, bit of legend in Lev Grossman, and a different kind of legend with Cher's memoir. So I'm going to try this business of not even thinking, what do I want to read? Just picking up the next thing on the pile. That's got some mileage in it, I think. And then December, if we figure on 6 books in a month, I do have all sorts of Christmassy books that I like to dip into. I like to reread certain stories, picture books, annuals. They don't count in terms of what I'm reading new. They're just there as part of the kind of reading furniture. So for the 6 books that I've settled on that are all new to me, although this isn't new to me, O. Henry, The Gift of the Magi. It's a new copy though, and especially for book club, picking out some of his Christmassy stories in one of these puffin or penguin cloth-bound books. Is it puffin or penguin? Penguin Classics. They've picked out, how many? About 12. All seasonal stories, which I think I might read next, actually, after November's finished. And then another collection of stories from the Women's Press back in early 90s, I'd guess. I picked this up in a charity shop earlier this year, and I thought I'll put this by because it's a kind of endangered species thing. It's so of its time. This is 1991, when I was first reading kind of feminist and queer books, and there were lists that published in those kind of avowedly political ways before everything went mainstream and lost its edge, we could say. But there's some lovely people in this. Fiona Cooper, Zoe Fairbairns, Sarah Maitland, my friend Sarah, all sorts of interesting people doing a women's press take on Christmas, a book that I didn't know existed, The Man Who Loved Presents. And then I've mentioned this a few times because I read James Lovegrove's Doctor Strange novel this year. I went back and found one of his Sherlock Holmes spooky stories, The Christmas Demon, from a couple of years ago. And this I picked up a little while ago, ready for Christmas last year, I think, and forgot about it. Laurie Lee's Village Christmas and Other Notes on the English Year, specifically for the Christmas chapters. I either read it anthologized or heard it on the radio, I can't remember which, but Laurie Lee's description of Christmas in his village was something I wanted to savour. So I got this nice Penguin Classics, which I think has only just been compiled in recent years. Everything by Laurie Lee I've read, I've enjoyed. I haven't read everything, but over the years I've enjoyed him. Then this anthology, more short stories, in fact, A French Christmas, which I've talked about before and dipped into, but restrained myself to wait for December. And the Jeanette Winterson book on Christmas, which I've kind of looked forward to, although I haven't really enjoyed much by Jeanette Winterson for a number of years. I think it's like many very successful writers, and I shouldn't say this, but I will, that if everyone goes round telling you you're a genius for 30 years and life isn't, if everything goes your way, it's not always great for a writer. Something's going your way, that's quite good, but it's no good having smoke blown up your arse for year after year after year. I've worked with 3 poet laureates, so I know what I'm talking about. I've worked in universities where they employed very famous, very lauded writers, and very famous, very lauded writers came to visit. And I've been at lots of things with those kinds of people, and the people who've had smoke up their arse most of their lives are usually kippered. That's unfair. But I think being overly praised doesn't help a writer. But as I say, some praise is good. Anyway, that's hopefully Christmas. I've gone and dug through all those stacks that you saw, looking for things that I think would be a good present to myself in the first 2 months of the year, in the darkest days of the year, in January and February. So there's a romantic Parisian novel, the Paris novel by Ruth Reichel, which I think is a bit bookshoppy and a bit Parisian and a bit foodie. And my friend Rosie found this for me, and my friend Jamie bought me this drag memoir about a gay boy growing up and going to Soho for my birthday. So that's on the pile too. I need to have a Millie Johnson on the pile, because that would be like a tonic come January. Similarly with the second Tracy Whitwell novel, which has got a Works sticker on it, about her slightly boozy Geordie spiritualist lady amateur detective. The first of which I absolutely loved and will be in my favourites of the year list for this year. So putting one of those aside for January, February is a great idea. Gillian Flynn. This is a present from my friend Siobhan, and I've said before, I read Gone Girl a number of years ago and loved it. And for some reason, I haven't returned to Gillian Flynn, just in case the experience wasn't as great, which is daft. It's a daft reason. So I'm glad to have another one to read. There needs to be a thriller on the pile. So I've got a couple of romantic comedies, a memoir, a cosy detective, and an out-and-out thriller so far. So I'm getting that variety in my diet. Yellowface, which I've meant to read for a while and is knocked about. Sebastian Faulk's Jeeves sequel, Jeeves and the Wedding Bells, which is part of that business of returning to books that reunite you with favourite characters, which is an important part of reading, I think. I picked this up at the library, at the little library at Levenshulme Station. It's a nice copy, an American copy, of A Visit from the Goon Squad. And I didn't realise what it was about. It's been out for years and years. Jennifer Egan. It's about kind of aging former punk rocker. And I've had this recommended again and again over the years. So a 90s contemporary classic that I missed out on. And then a book that got lots of coverage last year and I still don't know much about. I just know it as That Octopus book. Remarkably Bright Creatures, Shelby Van Pelt. I know my friend Rylan enjoyed this. So enjoyable seems to be the thing that binds this pile together. Talked about this already, I think, when it arrived in the post. The first 2 volumes of memoir, autobiography, biography, because it's Hannah Hawkswell with Barry Cockcroft, and she's the lady they found living on a farm by herself in the 70s and made a TV documentary about. And she actually lived quite close to where I grew up, on the kind of slightly bleak landscapes of the Pennines, just beyond Bishop Auckland. And I remember these books being at my mum's. She loved these books, and my nana did as well. So I've got this hankering. I think I saw some clips online. I suddenly remembered about her story as, you know, somebody who was discovered by TV, was a kind of very early reality TV star who they returned to in later years, and there was books about her and about her life and how harsh her life was, how poor and how self-sustaining, all of that stuff. She had 1 cow that she reared each year and lived without electricity. And anyway, then she was taken abroad and went to America and went to Venice and saw the world. So I thought I'd return to those books, which I dipped into in the past. There's something that intrigues me about that kind of solitary life. And another memoir, Lowell Tolhurst. I've mentioned this before as being on my pile. It's still no nearer the top, but I'm going to put it in this January, February reading club of 1. Cured, his story of starting the cure with Robert Smith. And this has knocked around as well, but it's so long it's put me off. But maybe the dark days of winter are the time to read Carlos Ruiz Zafón again, The Labyrinth of the Spirits, which is a sequel or a prequel perhaps to is it The Colour of the Wind? Or is that Pocahontas? I can't remember now what his novel was called. The Angel's Game was the second one, and I remember sitting in Russell Square in Bloomsbury on a really sunny day in autumn, reading that when that came out in 2009. The first one, I've forgotten what it's called completely. That's really stupid. But I like the series. And I have found this one to be off-puttingly large. I was pleased to find it for £2 in a bookshop. But I need to make myself tackle it, which is stupid. They're just, they're fun, fairly light reads. They're cosy, bookshoppy, crimey. So it's no great biggie to deal with. I think because I found the third in the series not so good. And I don't know why that was. I think I just wasn't in the mood for it. Or it tried to draw upon and close up the gap in the first 2 books, perhaps. But maybe enough time's gone by now that I will enjoy it again. So anyway, there's 12 books for January, February. There's 6 books for Christmas, for December, and 2 for next week. We'll see how far I get and how I stick to these. I'm kind of assuming that I don't go out and buy loads of books or get given loads of books, or books don't appear in my life, which they always do, and they always disrupt everything. But it's good to have a plan, isn't it? And it's good to have an idea that this is what January, February look like, because they're kind of nebulous. and it's good to think ahead to that. December's always great, but there's that sudden crash, isn't there, on January the 1st. I don't even know what work I'm going to be doing then, what I'm going to be writing. That's a point. Maybe I should have checked out that first. Anyway, I'm burbling on. I will see you again soon, and please subscribe. I forget to say that. Do subscribe if you haven't. Okay, goodbye.